Hello, my name is again John Bozeman. I'm here to give you a presentation on the facts of life, and that is the fact that death comes to us all. When we think about death, we don't like to talk about it. Why? It's a taboo subject. Um, we find ourselves to be uh, not inept of the ability to understand these things, but at the same time, a lot of us don't come in as well informed on the exact process of dying, how that person is feeling, how we feel as loved ones, or even how the decedent is feeling going through this process. And what I want to do is I want to help you gain an understanding of where the person that you love, whether it be a friend or family member, wherever they are in this process, we will identify it. We will explain a little bit of what's going on there. And we'll also kind of explain where you might be in the grieving process as well. So as we begin, I'll give you a couple of personal uh, tidbits of information as far as my grandparents, good friends of mine, what they went through in the dying process and how it made me feel and how it made them feel. So, as we begin, we come to the definition. What is death? Well, death is action or fact of dying or being killed. It's the end of the life of a person or organism. The definition that we're going to focus on is the permanent ending of vital processes, and they cell or tissue. We can all come to the agreement that we are organisms. We are organisms that are quite efficient, actually. And these certain processes that take place in the human body during the dying process gives a broad definition and a broad explanation to what is actually happening. And mainly we're going to focus on this word, process. Death is a process, just as the grieving cycle is a process. So as we continue, we will notice, as we take a closer look into dying, what do we think of when we think of death or dying? Most of the time, like I said, it's a taboo subject. We don't really like to talk about it because it makes us uncomfortable. We think of it as a bad thing. And just why do we think that? It's kind of self-explanatory. Nobody likes the feeling that you get when you have a friend or a loved one who is going through the process of dying. And as we said, just as death is a process that you as the decedent or your friend or relative has to experience, the grieving process is what we as the living experience. Norton antivirus will not help you with that, and I'm a little perplexed as I do not have Norton as to why this is popping up, but we'll just continue along like it never even happened. But as I said, just as death is that process that the decedent is experiencing, the grieving process is what we as a living experience. And we can take a look at what some of the most common signs of someone who is close to death, what they are, what they can show, so we can get a better understanding of what we feel and where in that grieving process we might be. All right, this is Mr. John Henry Jones. He's going to be our decedent for the day. And as you can see, Mr. Jones is dying of natural causes. And, well, you might say, well, what are natural causes and why is it called that? It's pretty simple. A natural cause is anything that does not have to do with a traumatic situation, such as a car accident, murder, suicide, diseases and disorders such as cancer, stroke, things like that. a lot of people would consider this broad term to be dying of old age. We say dying of old age, and well, what does that mean? Well, yeah, in the Bible we've heard of people living hundreds and hundreds of years. Now, how you perceive um, the Bible and the way that the process of life and death works, each to his own. But when we say someone dies of old age, typically they have either experienced cardio failure, heart failure, um, some sort of brain issue, whether it be Alzheimer's, dementia, and things like that. And we'll continue into that a little further. But we can also start seeing some issues that come with the pulmonary uh, aspect of the human body and lung failure. And again, we'll look a little further into it as well. Now, stage 1 is loss of appetite. Now, what causes this stage? And I've brought a couple of notes some things that I wanted to ask you, a couple of things I wanted to touch on. And one of these things is I want to know, as you comment on this video, what is your favorite food? And what if you only had that one meal left? What would that food be? Now, for me, that's a pretty tough decision. I love a good steak, and I'm a big Italian food fan. You can tell by my gut if you can even see it right now. But with my gut, I love Italian food, and I would have to say chicken marsala is absolutely one of my favorite dishes. Now, as I die during the dying process, I might crave it at one moment, and I might not. A prime example being when my mother's mother passed away just over a year ago. She hadn't had much of an appetite, really. She came to us and she said, I just can't eat much, my stomach hurts, and this, that, and the other. And then a little later, her appetite showed back up. And she said, well, I would love a steak. I would love a baked potato. I want a salad. So I went home. I grilled it for her. I came back. And even though that she wanted to try and eat some of it, she enjoyed the taste of it, for some reason she just didn't want it anymore. She no longer felt hungry. She no longer felt thirsty. Now, her being on hospice care, she did not receive any IV fluids, but she wasn't thirsty. My grandmother had not eaten in 5 weeks, and she died peacefully in her sleep after that. Well, there's a perfect explanation for this. Forgive me. The explanation for this is actually that your body knows exactly what it needs. And once your body has the sufficient energy to complete the task that it's trying to do, it won't require any further assistance. And dying, actually, it takes very little energy. But because, like I said before, we are efficient organisms. So this brings us to the next step in that dying process, and that step is the excessive fatigue and sleep. Okay, and here we say, remember how we said it doesn't take much energy to complete this process? Well, here's why. Your body knows what it needs. Once your body has sufficient energy to complete the task at hand, you're not going to require any further assistance. Dying takes very little energy because, again, we are, efficient. And here we go into the next slide. And the third part of this process, third stage, is going to be physical weakness. Okay. Now, by the time that we get to the third stage, a lot of times this is when we start getting phone calls about our relative or our friend saying, okay, you might want to come in, they're not doing too well. By stage 3, many of us start having ideas of what's going on. And since we know that our decedent hasn't been doing too well, they haven't been eating as much, and now we're starting to notice that they're having trouble moving. Maybe they might need help getting into a specific position in the bed and things like that. And right now you might start feeling the first sign of the grieving process, denial and isolation. Okay, now you might say, okay, well, my loved one hasn't died yet. If we're only at stage 3 and they're just increasingly weak, how can I be grieving? Okay, this is the answer. Just as dying is a process, grieving is a process too. Just as your loved one's body knows what it needs and understands what's going on, you need to listen to your body as well, because it understands what's going on in this situation. Okay? And it's pretty simple. You might tell yourself that everything is going to be okay and that your loved one is going to be fine. You might deny the fact that they've been declining and they are in fact dying. Now, this is okay because it's not only is it completely natural, but your loved one will expect you to do this. It's not anything to really feel bad about. And oftentimes we do this as a way of coping with what's happening or in the preparation of what we know is to come. Now, stage 4 in mental confusion or disorientation, this is a very broad section as well. And what we know is that many things can cause the fatigue in stage 3. Well, the mental confusion and disorientation can both be a catalyst for stage 3, and it can also be one of the signs of stage 3. And you'll notice that as your loved one's body is starting to break down, and when I say break down, I mean in the ways of the proteins and the chemicals. Like we said, your body is an organism. And once it starts to break down, the brain is no exception to that. The breaking down of the body will cause the release of endorphins and dopamine. Okay? Now, endorphins and dopamine can be pain relieving, and they can cause a relaxed feeling. And the breaking down of the brain functions will leave only part of the, I guess you could say, the higher functioning available. And even then, it's oftentimes sporadic. And this can be the explanation of the confusion and disorientation you will find in stage 4. Now, persons who had or have Alzheimer's disease and dementia, as I've mentioned before, can make drastic changes that are more so than a person who is not afflicted with such diseases of the brain. Now, both of my grandmothers who passed within a year of each other. My mother's mother had Alzheimer's. My father's mother had dementia. My mother's mother had been born with one kidney. She was born with a double uterus. She was told she would never have children. She had 5. She beat lung cancer. She beat stomach cancer twice. She smoked for just at 55 years. She died at the age of 82, and she was married at the age of 16. She was a trooper, and she's the one that I've talked mostly about when I say that she's been the reason that I've gone into the profession that I'm going into. Now, my father's mother, though she had the dementia, and as I said, my grandmother passed away from the Alzheimer's disease, but as my father's mother had dementia, that is not what killed her. What killed her is she had, uh, it is a lung disorder, and it's pulmonary fibrosis. And essentially, the insides of the lungs, if it is located on the insides, you start with the bronchi, the bronchioles, um, and they will get a coating on them almost. It's almost like cysts or toughening, and they just don't absorb as well. Now, if it's on the inside, you can survive that much longer. Hers happened to be on the exterior of the lung, and as it was on the exterior of the lung, it triples in speed from what we were told by the doctors. It would triple in speed, and her death would come much faster than if it had been on the inside. However, after only being given 6 months to live, she lived for 8 years. 8 years, as opposed to 6 months. We know a lot of things in the medical field. A lot of you are going to school to be nurses. My wife is a nurse, going to school to be a nurse practitioner. We know a lot of things about medicine, but your body knows more about itself than we will ever learn in each of our lifetimes put together. So please don't let the confusion and the disorientation in this process, because it can really wear on you. And in the next slide, we'll start talking about the next step. Stage 5 is when we see labored breathing. We notice a continuation of the signs from stage 2, which are the excessive fatigue, and sleep. Now, labored breathing will be caused by 3 major functions breaking down. 1, muscular tissues breaking down. The diaphragm, that's a muscle in your abdomen that makes breathing possible. It rests just below the lungs, and it actually separates the body in the 4 sections of your torso, separates the top 2 from the bottom 2. So you will have your upper left quadrant, upper right quadrant, lower left quadrant, lower right quadrant. Right in the very center of that is where your diaphragm will be. Now, the brain losing its function and loss of oxygen increases this particular organ failure. As we said, as the diaphragm, the muscle that helps you to breathe, becomes weakened, you're not able to breathe as much, and you might have problems breathing. You might go in and out, stopping for momentarily, sometimes up to a minute or longer, and then the person will take a deep breath. And this is the process of the lungs going into pulmonary failure. Now, as we talk about this, we can worry a lot about, okay, now is this person in pain? Well, if we think back to the endorphins and the dopamine, the majority of the time they are actually very comfortable. And that's a comforting thought to know. So the comforting thing to know is that they are resting. And though we might think that they are having some serious problems, they could, in fact, just be sleeping and not know that anything's going on. And as I said, the labored breathing can be both sporadic and at times nearly ceasing. The body's will to survive comes in when that person starts taking those gasps of breath. But again, they're in less pain because he's restful and has been sleeping. Any vocalizations that come during this time, which could be the loved one muttering a word or two, they could be having a private conversation with the Lord and not even realize who is around. The moaning or a couple of words here and there does not mean that your loved one is in pain at the moment. Now, the social withdrawal. You're probably by now facing stage 2 of the grieving process and need some comfort. Well, as we're talking about stage 2, um, your loved one might have begun muttering, like I said, a few words, might become unresponsive to the world around them. You may try to speak to them and get no answer or no reaction. As I said, don't let this bother you. The sense of hearing has been scientifically proven to be one of the last senses to remain during the dying process. And it's all right to reassure your loved one that you care and that you're with them. Think about it this way. If it brings comfort to you, then it would bring comfort to them. And that's a really good way to really go about it. Now, we might actually be angry at our loved one. It's a very stressful time. And as we see, I mean, you could be close to your loved one and just understand that things are going on, and then you could be grief-stricken. You could come up, you could be angry. Now, we might be angry, and we might express that anger towards our God or deity for putting our loved one through such a long and painful process. It's what we're seeing. And we might ask, what did he do that's so wrong to deserve this? Or you might have the, I can never forgive you mentality that a lot of people do have. Now, this is okay. It's all natural. It's what your body does. Your body is trying to cope with what's going on, and one of the ways that we cope with things is through anger. But as we see here, in anger, stage 2 of the grieving process, it is often short and goes directly to stage 3, which is bartering. And we're going to talk some more with this on this next slide over here. So go ahead and get to it. Now, I neglected to put any type of image into this. Because let's just face it, who wants to see pictures of someone's penis? I don't. But to each their own. So we'll talk about it this way. Okay, the loss of appetite in stage 1 has gotten us to this point right here. We've got the changes in kidney function. The kidneys are slowly shutting down. Okay, now that the body knows that there's not really any more need for their use of their function, and it's begun metabolizing that energy left from those cells. Now, seeing the stage of the dying process might make you try and bargain with God, bargain with your deity. And so, I've been guilty of it myself. I've said, God, just do this for me this one time. Make them all better. I can't lose her, And I'll say, God, I promise I'll do better. I'll do this. I'll do that. I'll do this. If you do this one thing, I'll do this. We try and barter. Now, even though that's stage 3, it seems like, wow, we're really not getting very far with this. We're almost done. There are only 10 or so stages in death, and now, granted, your loved one will not always show each of these symptoms, but we do know that with the grieving process, you might not feel those as well. I don't know if, I know I'm not like everyone else, but when my father's mother passed back in July, it was understood that she was not doing well. I was very sad. I had so many fond memories. And, I spoke at her funeral. I gave a eulogy. I was a pallbearer. I actually gave a sermon at her funeral, and everything went so very well, you know. But I didn't cry. I hadn't cried since actually last week over her death. And that was only because we lost the rental property in Gatlinburg to the fires. And I started thinking of, oh, these memories, oh, all these good times, and you know, how would she be feeling now? I started crying. Well, I realized I just finished the grieving process. I had come to the acceptance of her passage. And even though that, yeah, we lost a rental property, it's the memories that we have that really make the difference. Now, stage 7, coming from the kidneys not working like they would normally work, and the fact that they're urinating less frequently, those fluids have to go somewhere. They'll naturally be deposited away from the heart. This will result in this puffy appearance you see here. Swelling in the lower extremities and sometimes the face and hands. And if you look at the difference, you can see the tendons along the tops of the feet. You can see the joints defined clearly in the toes. You can see here in the instep, right here where the joint of the foot, of the toe right here is, and followed a line here to the heel. You can see this curvature right in here, where the arch of the foot is. Well, on this slide, you can't really see this defined arch. And you can't really see the joints nearly as well as you can in the foot on the left. However, don't worry about this because this is seldom painful. If anything, like my grandmother's experience, she only felt cold because of the decreased circulation and felt the pressure of the sheets more than anything else. And feeling that pressure on her feet, the sheets, was actually this pressure here. So if it's as light as a sheet or a blanket, that's not uncomfortable. Now, the coolness in the tips of the fingers and the toes. What we're starting to see is that as the circulation gets increasingly weaker, the blood is going to be distributed less in the hands, legs, and the feet of the individual, because that blood flow is being used to keep vital organs. Again, this comes back to the will to survive of the human body. Now, as I said, as the circulation gets weaker, then we'll begin to see what's called mottling. Okay, now this is that splotchy or blue skin tone. If you're cold-natured, you can look at your hands, and you can see, if you look at your hands or your feet, or sometimes on your legs or your forearms, it'll look a little splotchy. It will look similar to this area right in here. It's completely normal, and don't worry, you're not dying. It's just the decreased blood flow to the epidermal layers in these extremities. Now, when you're cold-natured like that, or you have a small frame, that's very, very popular. Now, during the dying process, it can be noted on the soles of the feet over here as the first indication. Now, because of this one, the body only being able to circulate blood to the vital organs, now the heart, lungs, and brain. Like I said, it's that will to survive. If you'll notice here in the arches of the feet, they are much bluer. That is because it holds more blood in the arch of the feet than it does towards the tips of the toes. And again, here we see the tips of the fingers kind of start to turn a little blue, but we have, a nice pink color throughout the rest of the hand and everything like that. The fingertips might be cool, but hands might be warm. Same as with the legs. The legs might be warm, but the toes might be cold, or the feet might get cold. Again, this is more of a slight discomfort than pain. Now we come to modeled veins. Now, the difference in modeling of the extremities and the venous modeling is not significant. The previous slide that we saw, I'll go ahead and go back and give you a quick comparison here. Forgive me, I'm doing this backwards. This is what is called venous modeling. And you can tell the difference because if you were to zoom in on this, which I'm not able to do right now, but there is actually, you can see the striations of the veins going throughout the leg here. And like I said, there are deeper veins in the soles of the feet. And as we can see, a little bit of blue right here on this toe, and things like that, and here. The reason being is because of the larger that the vein is, the more distinct it's going to be in a pattern like this, as the surrounding area gets more pale, because they have smaller veins. Now, as we talk again on the modeling of the veins, this is one of the final stages in the dying process. By the time that this happens, death is usually a very short time away. Minutes, hours, maybe a day, depending on the situation. And nobody wants to see this happen, but eventually we will reach stage 4 in that grieving process, which is depression. Depression is just a natural feel for your loved one, as breathing is natural for everybody who's alive. If you do feel depressed beyond general grief, you can always go talk to a grief counselor. Your local funeral home or hospice center has plenty of information regarding assistance. Now, real quick, we'll talk about the modeled veins here, and modeling in the veins and extremities shows a little bit more definition than what we saw in the beginning. Before, we would only see the pads of the fingers, maybe the fingertips, turning a bit pale blue, areas around the knuckles, any place on your face that has warm spots, the pink hues and everything like that will start to decrease. That's when you will end up with the bluing under the fingernails. And again, that is only caused by the lack of blood flow to the extremities, and is not painful. And here we are, the final stage of death is the last stop, or as some people refer to it as the good death. And this, of course, is self-explanatory. Our loved one, our friend, is no more. In this case, it is Mr. John Henry Jones, who is gone from this earth. And, as we remember our loved ones, one of the best ways that we can get through it is with a eulogy. And in this case, Mr. Jones asked me to read this for you. He says, "Friends, do not be sad in my going away. Instead, think of the good times we had and the many blessings in life I have shared. Go with each other from this place and grieve no more." Now, by the time that the funeral has come and gone, many will move to the 5th and final stage of grief. That final stage is acceptance. although getting to this point is frustrating, it's painful, the reason we feel this is because of the love and admiration we have for our loved ones. And that's why we feel anything at all. And in honesty, to not feel, to feel nothing, you would have to be inhuman. Once again, my name is John Bozeman. I thank you all for checking out my presentations, giving me some comments as to how I've been doing in this class. I hope everyone has enjoyed it. It has been one of my favorite classes, and like I said, it was a precursor to get me back into the swing of things, I guess you could say. But yeah, if anyone wants to, reach out to me on social media. If you have any further questions, as I continue into this degree and I start learning more about being a funeral director and about the embalming process, if any of you have questions and want to know those things, I would be happy to talk to you in a private forum about it. But until then, we will leave those things unsaid per my better judgment. I wanted to talk about them before, but that's not going to happen. So once again, I hope you enjoyed this. Y'all check it out and have a great rest of the year. Thank you and God bless you.